Welcome to part 3 of Control and Coordination. In this video, we are going to discuss about reflex action, neuromuscular junction and muscle movement. Now first, how signals are transmitted between one neuron and another neuron. There are thousands of receptor cells in our sense organs. They detect stimuli such as heat, cold, pain, smell and taste. The stimulus received by a receptor is passed on in the form of electrical signals through the dendrites to the cytone of the neurons. An impulse passed on by the cytone travels along the axon of that neuron. When it reaches the end of the axon endings release a chemical called neurotransmitter which diffuses across the synapse and stimulates the dendrites of the adjacent neuron. In this way, sensations from one receptor reaches the CNS. Now we can see the diagram of it. Here you can see axon of a previous neuron. Here synapse is there. This axon of the previous neuron is in touch with the dendrites of another neuron. So from axon of one neuron, the signal goes to the dendrites of the other neuron, and from dendrites to the cytone through the axon it will get transferred to the endings of the axon. There another dendrites will accept that signal and it is again transmitted in this manner. Now coming to the normal stimulus response pathway. The stimulus is accepted by the receptor. From the receptor, sensory neurons takes the stimulus to the CNS and the brain identifies the response for the stimulus, send it through the motor neurons to the effector, that is the mostly muscle cells, and they respond. So this is the stimulus response pathway. Now we can see one example. In this example, the stimulus is a glass of water which is accepted by the receptor in the eyes. It is sent through the neuron, sensory neuron to the brain. The brain decides the response for this and motor neuron carries this response to the effector and we drink the water. That is the response. So in one again example. In this example, stimulus is the bright light. The eye is the receptor which is accepting it. Through the sensory nerves, it reaches the brain. Brain identifies the response for the stimulus, sends the response through the motor nerves to the effector. The effector is the muscles in the eyes which helps the pupils to shrink, and this is the response to the stimulus bright light. So these are examples of normal stimulus response pathway. Now we can go to another pathway which is known as reflex action. So you can see in the diagram you have a stimulus here, that is heat. The skin is the receptor here. It is taking this stimulus to the through the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. It is not taking to the brain. Here we can see the spinal cord. So decision is taken by the spinal cord and it is sent through the motor neurons to the effector, that is muscles of the arms, and we see the response, that is we lift the hand. So that is the response. So in this pathway you are finding that spinal cord is the area which decides on the response. So this type of pathway is known as reflex action. So sudden involuntary responses to stimuli is called reflex action. The spinal cord is the center of reflex action. The path followed by reflex action is called reflex arc. A reflex arc is formed by a sensory nerve and a motor nerve joined by connecting nerve, that is relay nerve, present in the spinal cord. As the impulses don't have to travel all the way to the brain and back, reflex action is an extremely quick action. Reflex action have evolved in animals because the thinking process of the brain is not fast enough. Sneezing, coughing, yawning, hiccups, shivering are examples of reflex action. Now we can see the flow chart of reflex action. So you have the stimulus taken up by the receptor. Through the sensory neurons, it reaches the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, we have relay neuron. It transmits messages from one area to the other in the spinal cord itself. Then the response is sent through the motor neuron to the effector, and then the effector takes the response. There is another flow chart to show the reflex arc. You have the stimulus, the receptor. Through the sensory neurons, it reaches spinal cord. So here spinal cord is shown by synapse, relay neuron and synapse. Then the neurons, motor neurons are taking the response to the effector, and you have the automatic response. So reflex action is involuntary. It is not under our control because spinal cord is taking the decision. Brain is not involved in reflex action. Now let us discuss about neuromuscular junction. Now in this diagram, the yellow colored structure is the motor nerve. This is the part of the neuron. And the pinkish color is the muscle fiber. Now when you take the motor nerve, this end membrane is known as the presynaptic membrane. The membrane which is coming before synapses. So it is known as presynaptic membrane. Here you also can see synaptic vesicles. These synaptic vesicles contains the neurotransmitter. Okay. You can also see mitochondria and calcium channels in the motor nerves. So motor nerves, you have the synaptic vesicle, calcium channels, and the membrane, end of that membrane is known as the presynaptic membrane. Now you have the synapse, that is the gap, that is known as synaptic cleft. After that you have the muscles. So this muscles membrane is known as the postsynaptic membrane, that is membrane coming after synapses. So you can see the fold in this membrane, and you can see receptor cells, this blue colored receptor cells. These receptor cells will accept the neurotransmitter when it reaches the muscles. So these are the different parts of neuromuscular junction. Now it acts as a bridge between nervous system and the muscular system. And the structure consists of presynaptic membrane, synaptic cleft, postsynaptic membrane. Presynaptic membrane is the motor neuron. It has synaptic vesicles. This contains neurotransmitter. One example for neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. It also has calcium channels. Now, synaptic cleft is the gap between presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane. It allows neurotransmitter to diffuse and reach the other side. Postsynaptic membrane is the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are bundle of muscle fibers called myofibrils. Myofibrils contain two filaments. Thick filaments called myosin and thin filaments called actin. This gives the striated appearance to the skeletal muscles. We have studied about skeletal muscles in class 9th. Now there is another diagram of neuromuscular junction. You can see the motor neuron here. The violet colored things are the synaptic vesicles which contain the neurotransmitter. You can see the synapse. Now these vesicles are diffusing into the synapse and reaching the muscle fiber. Okay. Now in the muscle fiber you can see the receptors are accepting the neurotransmitter. Okay. Now we can move to the next part about muscle movement. So after getting the neurotransmitter, how the muscles are moving. When neurotransmitter reaches the muscle cells, they trigger a series of changes, ultimately causing the muscles to contract or relax. For muscle contraction, the myosin filaments slide past the actin filaments. They retain their actual positions during muscle relaxation. Now you can see the diagram. The red colored structure is the myosin filament and the green color is the actin filament. So myosin filaments are more thicker than actin. So this is the actual position of muscle cells when they are relaxed. Now you can see the other diagram in which first is relaxation, that is you can see myosin and actin in their actual positions. But when they are contracted, myosin filaments will enter inside the position of actin filaments, that is they slide over actin filaments. So this is how muscles contract. Now some important terms to discuss. Relay neuron, it is also known as interneuron. It passes signals between neurons. They are only found in brain, spinal cord and visual system. Next is sarcomere. It is a unit of skeletal muscle. It is also present in cardiac muscles. It has actin and myosin filaments. Here we come to the end of this video. Next video is on endocrine system. Thank you for watching.